Hey guys, we're back. As you can see, new set behind me. I'm actually in China right now building out our Asia operations. This episode, we're answering your questions on activewear. The questions are categorized and timestamped down below. Feel free to skip forward to whatever parts you want to learn about. Miguel asks, what do you look for when trying to make a quality shirt designed for runners? So when you are designing anything for sportswear, you really have to think about what is that person going to be doing. When you're running, you are going to be moving up and down in the Z-axis, having movement with your arms, as well as moving forward. So you need to make sure that the arm holes are large enough to accommodate that movement and not cause chafing under the armpits. The fabric needs to be lightweight enough, but not too stretchy because you don't want that shirt to be bouncing with every single step. You also want to take a look at breathability. How can I design this garment to actually have either additional venting or have a mesh-like structure to dissipate heat from the body? And then finally, you have to really make sure that that fabric doesn't chafe against the body, because then if you are running long-term and it's chafing, and a lot of people who've run marathons will know this, that chafing on your nipples can be an issue where it will cause bleeding over time. So all these things you need to take into consideration when designing clothing specifically for running. Tom asks, what makes cycling gear premium or not? So when you're designing clothes for cycling, you're going to be leaning forward, you're going to be moving your legs. You also need a fabric that is compressive enough and smooth enough on the surface so you have low aerodynamic drag. You want to also make sure that they're using the correct thread that's not abrasive against the skin, especially in areas where there's a high degree of repetitive movement around the crotch. And oftentimes you're gonna need some cushioning against the seat. All those things and all those design considerations can make the difference between cycling wear that you just wear to look the part and cycling wear that actually performs with you and enhances you. Portuando Travels asks, what makes high-end golf polos so expensive? For those who don't know, golf polos can be upwards of like $200–300 per shirt. And oftentimes people might only wear this maybe 5 times. The reason why they're so expensive is because golf is an expensive sport. And oftentimes people will buy expensive things because they think it's going to make their golf game better. Golf brands know and understand this. That's why there's the Hanma Bears golf clubs that are gold plated. They're like 20 grand that don't perform much better than a pair of P790s. But people are willing to spend as much as they can to compensate for their lack of skill. I know this because I have very expensive golf clubs and I am not very good. Panda the Boy asks, what goes into making really good synthetics? Do new fabric designs usually start as a concept, or are they based on the abilities of the machines? So when it comes to new fabrics for activewear, there's several ways brands come across them. One is factories are constantly trying to develop new fabrics and basically playing around with their machines, coming up with new fabrics they're trying to sell to their customers. Two is when you are designing a fabric, you design with specific characteristics that you want. I want a fabric that is high compression, that is sweat wicking, that is soft, but also pill resistant. All these characteristics are things that you're going to now work with your fabric mill to now decide the components, how you're finishing the fabric, how you're setting the fabric to ultimately get that fabric that you want. Fibers are very important as well because it goes down to even how you're extruding these pellets into what shape filament and how many filaments are making each yarn. So ultimately both processes are done. It really just depends on how the brand is deciding to go about product development. Hamza asks, how do you make seamless clothing? So we actually did a whole deep dive episode on this for the Gymshark seamless leggings, so check out the video over here. Tabor asks, is the manufacturing process the reason why Nike Dri-FIT is so expensive? The reason why Nike Dri-FIT is so expensive is because it is a publicly traded company and it needs to pay for all these beautiful flagship stores. Vicon asks, how do you create open work material like Asics uses in their Meta Run shirts? Is it just woven in some intricate way, or do they perforate the fabric to match the pattern? That's what you call jacquard knitting. You are going to be knitting the fabric in that structure and it's programmed digitally. You can see what the process looks like here in this footage from one of our partner factories. Deluge of Corgi. I'm just fucking thinking of like a deluge of corgis. Deluge of Corgi asks, what makes one brand's polyester fabric better than another? And how do you tell the difference? On one end, you're going to get brands that are using very high volume polyester fabrics. And these are ones where the factories are making the filaments, the factories that are knitting the fabric, they just care about pumping out volume. So you're gonna get a more inconsistent fabric. On the flip side, higher end polyester is one that is paying attention to the tolerances that are happening when they're knitting the fabric. That's paying attention to the right maintenance and tooling for the filaments that are extruding the yarns. It's the brand's differences in their choice of supply chain that dictates the quality of the polyester fabric that they're going to be getting. Gabriella writes, I feel like everyone recommends natural fibers, but what fabrics are best for leggings? Synthetics. I know a lot of people want cotton leggings. You are already going to need to include either natural rubbers or spandexes to allow it to be compressive along the legs. So you're already not natural at that point. You need these fibers to be able to actually wick away sweat and dissipate it, whereas cotton will actually absorb it. If you want ultimately a very well-performing legging that is not sheer, you need to have filaments that are very, very small. And you can only get that small with synthetic fibers. Kira asks, since natural fibers are on the rise in certain segments of fashion culture, how do fibers like hemp, cotton, linen, jute, and wool perform for modern sports and activities? So I think when you're looking at sportswear, you really have to kind of like divide it between high performance sportswear, where synthetics are just going to reign, and then casual sports. I think everyone's getting more active these days, which is fantastic. And at the end of the day, if you're not optimizing for performance and you're really just looking for something that's comfortable, it's great to have more options because everyone's going to have different preferences at the end of the day. Smooth Nectarine asks, why isn't wool more widely used in activewear with its wicking, temperature regulation, and sweat resistance from the lanolin? So a lot of brands actually do use, let's say, merino wool. I think the reason why it's not more widely adopted is consumers just aren't looking for it. It costs more to make activewear from merino wool. And it's also durability, I find, at least in my own experience. If you are looking for something like merino wool, there is a large enough market for it that there are going to be a lot of brands that are selling it. But when you're looking at mass adoption, a lot of consumers just aren't willing to go through what it takes to take care of something that's made out of a specialty wool. Nick asks, what is GoreTex? Why is it popular and how is it unique? GoreTex is just a household brand name. They are a fabric brand with many different fabrics. When you are selling a jacket in the store and you put GoreTex, you don't need to tell people that it's going to be wind resistant and water repellent. People already know that fact. But do other brands also have similar advanced technologies? Absolutely. Richard asks, do SPF fabrics work? Some seem okay and some seem worse than non-SPF rated ones. So when it comes to sun protective fabric, this is usually rated in UPF, which is actually going to be how is it protective against UVA and UVB. A lot of the fabrics you are going to be finding are going to be woven fabrics because it actually creates a physical barrier. You can also get chemical treatments on the fabric that will protect you from the sun, but you'd be surprised how many of your regular clothes are actually UPF protective as well. A chemist writes, for a home sewer interested in making hiking trousers, what fabric descriptions or brand names should I be looking out for? So we're actually just finishing up a contract for the government where we're designing a lot of outdoor clothing, and you need fabrics that are going to be snag resistant. You need fabrics that are going to be abrasion resistant. You need fabrics that are going to be breathable, and if you can find it, have some degree of stretch. I would start with those terms whenever you're searching for fabrics, and then you're going to refine them based off of what's available around you. Valerie asks, how do you determine which type of seam is best for activewear? Honestly, most people for activewear just use flat lock seams because it lays flat against the body. The looper threads are quite long, so it allows for that mechanical stretch. A lot of brands are using bonded seams now as well. All that combined with elastic yarns, like high elastic, high stretch yarns, is what's going to give you seams that ultimately move with the body and do not restrict movement. Troy writes, why do I see supposedly active clothing have a significant amount of cotton? So there's a couple reasons for this. One is that brands can just say whatever they want. You know, I can get a burlap sack and say it's an active burlap sack. And then a lot of it also comes down to what consumers are searching for. And you want to be able to show up in those search results. So even though you're making stuff with cotton and maybe you're a brand that doesn't even have any experience making athletic wear, by having your cotton items labeled as sportswear or athletic wear, you're hopping on that bandwagon and ultimately driving sales. Braun Goat asks, What would it take for Tencel to gain more widespread use? So for those who don't know, Tencel is a brand of a semi-synthetic fiber that is closed loop and uses sustainably managed forests, which is going to be more eco-friendly than traditional semi-synthetics. We've actually used Tencel for a lot of our clients, and I think it's a great fiber. It's cool, it's soft to the touch, however, it is expensive. Until consumers are more aware of it and willing to pay the premium for brands, it's just not worth the additional cost because it doesn't lead to any additional sales. Bart asks, how does no stink fabric technology work? So oftentimes you're actually going to be adding metal particles, whether it be silver or zinc or sometimes copper. Similar to how like hospitals will have like brass knobs because it's naturally antibacterial. These finishes, they do wash off over time. There is some clothing that actually will have silver yarn that's actually knit into the fabric. Those will last a lot longer, but that's basically the gist of how those technologies work. Carrie asks, what determines the quality of activewear? How might a regular $10 rayon shirt differ from one that's sold as sportswear? So I think ultimately what it comes down to is intention from the designers. When you are creating something for sportswear or athletic wear, you have to take into consideration movement, perspiration, stretch, restriction, and ultimately the clothing you are making has to enhance the wearer's performance. Joe Y asks, how can you test garments in the store to avoid buying things that will deteriorate quickly? So there's a few things you can do. We talked about pilling earlier on in a video. We can just rub the fabric together. You can also actually just feel the fabric itself. Does it feel very loose for a t-shirt? Because if it does, it probably means it's been fairly loosely knit. You can also turn the garment inside out and take a look at the stitching. How well it's put together, even in terms of untrimmed threads, is a great indicator of how much the brand actually cares. If the garment has a very low quality control standard, that probably says a lot about their material selection and their design as well. Undefined asks, how can I choose activewear fabrics that don't stink? So that really comes down to washing and caring for it. You're going to find a lot of polyester in activewear just because it's very effective at wicking away sweat. The issue is that polyester also absorbs oils. So if you're sweating a lot and it's not washed right away, that smell is going to be stuck on there. Make sure you wash it well and you wash it soon after so you don't let that odor causing bacteria brew on your garment. The laundress asks, how can consumers avoid clothes that use harmful chemicals like formaldehyde to preserve color fastness, prevent wrinkles, etc.? I would say for the average consumer, this is going to be very difficult. This is one of those things where it's like, you hear people always looking for organic cotton. Once you take that cotton and it goes through the entire dyeing process, it is not organic anymore. Even different dye houses will have different dye solutions that they're using to ultimately get the final colors. You really have to look for brands that are making these claims and ultimately providing evidence that you can trust. Ison asks, PFAS, how much leaches off cheaper or more expensive versions of clothes? It's really going to be there for its water repellency. And it's an older technology, and a lot of mainstream, more well-known brands have already moved on from PFAS to newer technologies for their water repellency. So this is a case where just because a brand is cheaper, it doesn't mean it's going to be leaching more than a brand that is more expensive. However, it could mean that a cheaper brand is still using PFAS where a more expensive brand has moved on. But ultimately, I think that brands that have moved on from PFAS are going to be advertising that they have. The Switch UK writes, what would wet out first, a waxed cotton jacket or a GoreTex mountain jacket? So when we're really looking at a basically DWR coated bonded fabric jacket, I think that will probably perform better just because your seams are taped and bonded. A waxed cotton jacket does a great job, I think, for a lot of people. It's not going to be as breathable as a GoreTex jacket. You're going to have to selectively not wax certain areas to make it breathable. You are going to have to maintain it more often because you do have to apply the wax to keep it waterproof. So does it do a sufficient job, I think, for most people? Absolutely. And it provides a very different aesthetic as well. But if I'm looking at ultimate performance, I'm probably going to be leaning towards a DWR coated bonded fabric mountaineering jacket. That being said, if you have a good umbrella, either of them is probably fine. Mary Margaret writes, do you think the trend of wearing athletic clothing outside of the gym, aka athleisure, will end soon? I think the comfort that people have with athletic wear, that's something that they are going to continue continually pursue. However, people may want to bring back more of their fashion sense. In men's suiting, for example, you're starting to see a lot more stretch fabrics in dress shirts and suits because people are looking for that comfort. In terms of the traditional athleisure wear look, I think that might change over time, but the pursuit of comfort, that is not going anywhere anytime soon. And lastly, Jeff asks, why is activewear so damn expensive? This is actually across like all fashion. All fashion's gone so expensive and the quality's gone down. Everyone's competing for the same customer base. They're having to pay influencers. They're having to pay influencers more so that they work with their brand. And it's become this massive marketing game instead of actually being focused on the products themselves. And unfortunately, when you are buying clothing, you are buying that brand's marketing budget, you're buying that brand's logistics and everything that comes with that brand. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about this format where we focus on a specific topic. That's it for this one. Till next time.